Well, hello everyone. It has been a really long time since I've actually been very active on here. Uh, it has been probably about probably a little over a year or two, maybe 3 years since I've actually last done a review video like this. Mostly because I actually got really busy getting involved with the graduate program I got into a while back that I just recently finished this past fall. So I was pretty busy. I kept myself busy. I came out with the 4.0, so I worked really hard for it. I'm just thankful I actually got through it all. But other than that, uh, I did say that I was going to start trying to get back to seeing what I could do to get involved with these review videos and stuff like that. And it has been a while, like I said. Um, I had no clue where to start, where to begin. I had an idea where to start. Mostly because I wanted to start with something I was already familiar with and very easy to work with too. And at the same time, I will be trying to see what other kind of media reviews I could work with besides just like graphic novels, manga, video games. There's other stuff like anime and cartoons, film, anything. But at this time, I'm just kind of just leaving it towards stuff like that, just for kind of like those consumer interests and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I'm going to try to approach this from that kind of angle, so to speak. But other than that, I'm going to start trying to get more involved with that whole submitting these videos either on YouTube, Rumble, or Kick. For the streams, live stream stuff like that, I'll try to be more involved with the Kick for sure. Twitch wasn't kind of doing it for me, and at the same time, I heard some really excellent prospects about those ventures, so I did want to look into that in case I wanted to start working on stuff like that on there. I'm not necessarily sure what to do just yet. I have been thinking about doing some kind of like live streams of like some gameplay of some either retro modern stuff, gaming, or probably like showing some live streams of like either some movies or cartoons, anime, and stuff like that. Stuff like that. I have to keep myself busy with stuff like that and reviewing all that quality and all that stuff. So, and the influences. But other than that, I wanted to start with something pretty easy. It like I said, I'll try to keep this video short to at least hopefully 20 minutes, not to be this long-winded thing. Um, I actually decided to actually do this video on Death Note. Most as a series, as a manga series, actually. The anime was a pretty good what's that word? Adaptation, especially by Madhouse. They did a really excellent job. But this will pretty much be a very brief summary of the manga series. I mean, it did end, in my opinion, I like the way it ended better compared to the anime. Uh, but either way, this, however, will mostly focus on this release with the short story compilation. I do want to talk about this quite a bit more than the entire series as a whole. I think a lot of time has passed to pretty much say that it's safe to say that a pretty good number of people are quite familiar with the lore of the Death Note series. To kind of explain the mechanic to people that are still not aware, it's a series about this young kid who basically gets this notebook that's able to kill people just by writing their name. But there's obviously conditions to the notebook, and over time, he starts getting involved with this Shinigami, Death God, who basically was the one that dropped the book, and it becomes a cat and mouse game series between him and this other character that's trying to look for him. Basically, Light, the kid with the notebook, versus L, the detective trying to narrow down who it is. The entire series was initially supposed to be about that, but after it got to a point where they ended up writing L off, that's pretty much where the series was supposed to end. And even the creators of the series have pretty much foreshadowed that a lot, especially with their next series, Bakuman, which was somewhat a bit of a satire of the manga industry, which kind of allows me to see the industry from a different perspective instead of just like the one I initially had at first face value. So that's pretty much how influential the authors Takeshi Obata and Tsugumi Oba have usually they have obviously had a huge influence and impact on the industry. They have done a third series called Platinum End, which is basically Death Note 2.0, just different variables here and there. Instead of Shinigami, they're angels instead. You could tell that's kind of the way they wanted to go through it initially, without the whole editor meddling and all that stuff. But after Volume 7, from 8 on to the rest of the series and to the end, that was pretty much what kind of watered down the quality of the series. But in general, that is the basic gist of the series. And I actually have the entire box set of this. I've had this quite a number of years. I initially had the individual volumes back when I actually first came across the series around 2005 or six when I was still in high school. And I remember my first impression of the series mostly because of the first volume actually caught my attention a lot. And you can see that this is like the entirety of the series here. Pretty much supposed to end up to here, but then it just came up to here. This last volume here is actually a profile book with a copy of the first one shot pilot, which is also included in this. And like I said, I want to focus mostly on this release more so than this. I mean, I was like I said, I was very captivated when the first time I saw this series at Barnes and Noble back when I was in high school. And let me tell you, when I saw the plot, I was like, this sounds pretty cool. I read the whole entire thing from cover to cover, like real fast. I have not come across excellent page turners like that in quite a while, and very rarely, especially in this industry, do I ever find anything like that. This was one of the first page turners I've come across that allowed me to really appreciate the hard work it takes to actually create an excellent page turner, and that's a pretty tough, very tough skill to create, especially in this industry, to keep readers drawn in. Um, you know, Bakuman was the first series I'd say I probably read from first week to last during its serialization, but this is the one that really caught my interest. A little history about this. I did like this, how it was heavily influenced by Naoki Urasawa's Monster. You could tell that there are similar mechanics in terms of like these storytelling mechanics and the suspense factor to kind of wonder what's going to happen. And that series in my book was also an excellent page turner. I just thought that the plot mechanics with the notebook that kills people was just very pretty cool. But the derivative for that was actually from the 1960s, apparently, from what I've actually come to find out through some interviews and kind of figuring out a little bit more about what the authorship had to say about this series. Uh, Another page turner that I did like recently, like I said, you rarely ever come across this, is Promise Neverland. It's a really excellent escape series and very real. Like I said, very rarely you come across excellent page turners not knowing what's going to happen next. Um, I mean, the series does have its limitations, like Death Note does. I mean, every series does. But I mean, like I said, it was a very excellent page turner all the way to the end. It, I think the creative execution and direction would have been way better had those hindering elements that created those limitations of the series. I think it would have made it far more better in terms of its delivery and impact. But other than that, that's pretty much my impression. I mean, like I said, you very rarely come across excellent series like this. I mean, especially for stuff like Kimetsu no Yaiba. I mean, that was a very excellent page. No, well, not page turner. It was a very excellent, well structured series, and I knew from the very first week it came out, I knew that series was going places mostly because the art and the art style, the direction, the story, and the plot, it was all unique. It was also creative, but at the same time, you know that the authorship had excellent references to use to actually construct and build the series all the way through. It was almost kind of like one of those golden ratio kind of things, like especially for how concise it was throughout its run. And the limitations were very well addressed, but at the same time, it still made it such a very big seller that even really at one point really did compete very well against One Piece. I mean, it was a, I mean, that's how you sell a series if you can actually keep its quality check in line throughout the whole entirety. And obviously, the authorship for that series did very excellent to actually get through. So, like I said, I mean, a lot of authors and different manga series that we're working on started actually getting involved with actually studying to see how that actually that mechanic from beginning to end actually gave that excellent balance. So it had a huge impact and influence on the industry, and that's kind of what I like to talk about and focus on when it comes to evaluating a lot of this stuff. Because I don't like to talk about like deep, meaningful philosophy. That's like K-12 stuff. We like to be very practical with our references and citations and some so forth like that when something does come out. Stuff like that is usually typically personal interpretation by the readership, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the authorship's trying to communicate to the readers. And from what I understand, both Sugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata simply created this series just simply for entertainment value, and that's kind of how I see it, and I take it for what it is. Back then, when I was a kid, I did kind of look at it in that kind of fashion, but you don't want to get too caught up and get too sucked into a lore or even exclusive with one. I kind of make sure I try not to become too exclusive, mostly because I like to make sure I keep my tastes and my interests diverse and with a lot of variety and be open to different kind of things that may actually have some substantial progression in the industry or rather influence that actually creates a huge change overall. But other than that, let's get to talking about this. I mean, we've pretty much covered this. I mean, we don't really need to cover this because, like I said, everything has already pretty much been talked about. It's already been elaborated. The series does have very excellent suspenseful moments to understand to try to figure out what the characters are actually going to do within that social dynamic. And at the same time, there are pretty cool little tips and tricks that these guys have done on each other to try to one up each other. That's pretty much the gist of the series. I mean, the 13th volume, in my opinion, was kind of a little like very unnecessary. The only thing that it does bring value to the reader there was really just not just the one shot, the original one, which also includes like where they actually had the eraser. It had this thing with L's real name, which was never revealed throughout the series, and that's like, well, cool. Would have been better during the series instead of like after. But the thing is, I think this would have actually sufficed better for the 13th volume instead. But there are a couple of reasons as to why they showed up late. But at the same time, I kind of don't. My only gripe with this is really just some of the marketing, especially to like the newcomers, because to people that are very well seasoned with this franchise, they are. I am fairly positive that they are aware that these are just compilations of chapters that never made it to the during the serialization of its run. And that's what this is basically is because my first impression was thinking these are just random stories, but they're pretty much the extra chapters and one shots that were not really ran during this series initial run. The one thing I was highly very impressed about was that they finally included that one chapter, the chapter 109, uh, the aftermath chapter after this series finally ended. I mean, we had to kind of wait like about a little over like 12, 14 years to finally get an official printing and translation of that. This does have the one shot for the 2020 one shot that did come out. And of course you have the original one shot. So you have three one shots included in this, along with like a small four panel comics and the very small L short stories, and that's pretty much all you get with this. Uh, like I said, this would have been a far preferable 13th volume, and this pretty much does completely this is pretty much the rest of the series and the catalog of this whole entire series as a whole. And in my opinion, does a pretty good job of kind of like just closing the chapter on this franchise, mostly because it's already pretty much like kind of like beating a dead horse, and it's there's really nothing else you can really do with it. And honestly, I think it's a very excellent way to kind of just keep the compilations as they are at this point because we don't, there's really no need to kind of dilute the quality of the series anymore. And the authorship has already, expressed that with Bakuman and Platinum Man. And heaven knows that they'll probably be working on another project again. And hopefully it would be a pretty cool one. I usually like to read the stories that Takeshi Obata gets involved with because he's the artist that usually collaborates with the writer. And a lot of series he's worked on has been pretty cool. I do like I've only seen some of Hikaru no Go. That's when I actually was first familiar with his work before Death Note. There's also Sakon the Puppet Master. That's a really excellent one from the 90s that's still very obscure that I would really like to see localized over here. There is an anime of it too. I would definitely like to see that for sure. Uh, I've also, like I said, Bakuman was a very excellent series. If you want to become more informed about the mechanics and the way the industry kind of works and runs, that series allowed me to appreciate Gintama and Bobobo a lot more because that's what allowed me to understand the frame and the context that the authorship was trying to communicate with their work there. So it really did allow me to understand that whole fourth wall breaking relative to the whole typical traditional model of the hero's journey, which you always see pretty much everywhere. Usually, when that model is exploited in a way that's yet to have been done before to crash expectation, that's what usually creates that excellent page turner mechanic that usually gets people involved in a series. You don't really get a lot of that going on. And usually you kind of see a lot of that bridging at the end of every chapter installment for any series. One Piece for sure, you see that all the time. It's already finally ending on its final chapter. I could see it go down in a reverse slope curve compared to the way it started. You could tell Oda's definitely going in that direction with that. But other than that, uh, there's really not much to say left about this franchise. Uh, I mean, like I said, you don't come across a lot of page turners, even novels. Some of my favorite novels that had excellent page turner quality, and surprise, surprise, Stephen King actually makes that list with the Stand, which was an excellent page turner, but I think his best one in my book is definitely The Shining. That one really surprised me as I didn't expect that to be a page turner, but man, that was an excellent page turner. That's pretty much also like kind of like on par with Michael Crichton's stuff like the Andromeda Strain or anything. That's just very excellent storytelling for today's modern readership and stuff, so forth. But like I said, uh, a lot of that's mostly like that's page turner suspense factor that creates this whole page turner effect. And that's a very excellent skill to have, especially in an industry where you want something that really sticks out from the norm and leave a very influential impression that creates this influence on the industry and impact somehow. That's what usually makes an excellent, 1984 quality kind of novel read, in my opinion, at least. If you got something that's very influential like that, hey, at least contributed to the 1984 list of other derivatives and influences after. That's what a lot of people really do like to look for. Other than that, that's all I can say about my review for this video. I'm not sure what to touch up on next. A lot of what I've been mostly focused on, aside from the modern stuff these days, there's been a lot of OVAs stuff from the 80s and 90s, and of course the 70s. In terms of anime releases, I am considering probably creating some kind of like stream list throughout the week on the Kick. I'm not sure how, when, I'm still trying to figure a lot of that stuff out, mostly because I don't really have a lot of like the tech needed or stuff like that, but somehow I'll figure it out. But other than that, that's pretty much all there is for this review. So thank you very much for checking this out. If you have any feedback or comments or whatever, feel free to give your 2 cents worth to pretty much give some pretty cool feedback. Anyways, thanks a lot. Have a good one.